Well, we're going to spend a few minutes with the second-year head basketball coach at Southern Miss, Coach Donnie Tyndall. And Donnie, talk first just about the excitement that's sort of surrounding Golden Eagle basketball after a 27-win season and a run towards the conference championship, quarterfinal round to the NIT. Just talk about all the excitement and how Golden Eagle basketball is sort of exploded all of a sudden.
Well, it's been really neat to witness, John, because I go back to the couple days before I accepted the job and talking with different people that had been at Southern Miss or lived in Hattiesburg, and they all raved about the community, raved about the faculty and staff, the campus community itself. But the one kind of maybe negative, if it was a negative, was the fact that it was a football school first. They'd support football, talking about the fans, and then the fans would come out and really support baseball. But they never really had supported basketball since Coach Turk days. And my thing was, I'd been at LSU where football was the big deal and baseball was winning national titles. So I felt like if we could have a good product and put it on the floor, eventually those fans would come around and like what we're doing. And for it to be what it's been in just 1 year and the excitement that's around our program is a real tribute to our fan base. And obviously, I'm humbled to be part of it.
We'll talk about this year as a team. You lost obviously some big parts off of last year's team. Some guys that have left now, have graduated. But as you look at this team, what do you like about this team? What what are your thoughts on this year's team so far?
Well, when everybody gets healthy, John, and different things play out where our team is complete and whole, it's going to be a 10 or 11 man team, and that'll be the deepest team I've ever coached, barring injuries. So I like that. We're going to be deep, we're athletic, we're a little bit longer and bigger on our front line. We have some interchangeable parts where guys can play two and in some cases three different positions. So you can put a lineup out there that's a great defensive team, or you can put a lineup out there that might be a really good pressing team, maybe go a little bigger or have a three-point shooting team. It gives you some different options that maybe we didn't have a year ago.
Well, this year, now you'll start the year anyway without Neil Watson at full strength, and Gerald Brooks will miss perhaps a game or two. But you got a lot of new guys who have joined the club, including a couple of guys here last year that sat out in Aaron Brown and Chip Armlin. So good mixture of guys coming back and some newcomers who should make big contributions.
We do. We returned five guys that played pretty significant minutes. You mentioned Neil and Gerald, our backcourt, and then Mike Craig, who's a guy that was hurt but started and played major minutes until he was hurt with about a third of the season remaining. Davion Boardingham made great progress. Norville Carey played about 10 minutes a game as a freshman. He's back bigger and stronger as a sophomore. And the two guys you just talked about, Chip Armlin and Aaron Brown, are ahead of the other newcomers if for no other reason they spent a year in our program going through practices. Chip's an athletic 6'4" wing player that transferred from Minnesota, can slash to the basket, and I think can be a good perimeter defender. Aaron Brown's a 6'5" small forward that transferred in from Temple. He's tough, he's physical, he can make some shots behind the arc. So both of those guys are right now battling for starting positions. Both guys will be in our top 7 or 8, and even if they don't start, will play starter minutes. And then one freshman I think is important to mention, Matt Bengaya from Columbus, Ohio, redshirted for us last season. He's a guy that can play 2 or 3 different positions, as I talked about earlier, and do some nice things for us off the bench.
What's the most difficult thing for a new guy to adjust to when he comes to play for you? I mean, you ask a lot of your guys. You ask them to put a lot out there on the court. You want a great effort, but what's the hardest thing for them to sort of adjust to?
The accountability, because we hold them accountable, John, for everything they do. I mean, if they have study hall at 1 o'clock, no one walks in there at 1:05. If they're late, we run them the next morning at 6:30. If they have an 8 o'clock class, they don't walk in the classroom at 8:02, because if they're late 2 minutes, we're going to run them the next morning. And it just takes time. Guys have to learn the hard way. We're going to hold them accountable, and nothing changes when we get to the floor. If we say hit the line 10 times, it's not 9. They're going to hit it 10, or we'll do it over or make them run the sprints again. So that accountability because some of them have been, for lack of a better word, pampered along the way because they were such great players. It takes a little getting used to. And our new guys this fall that weren't with us this summer, they've struggled, but slowly but surely they've come along. And I think by the time you get guys to December, they're now kind of robotic in that they're a machine. They know how to handle things and go about their business in a professional way.
Your practices are not overly long, but you get a lot in those. There's not a lot of standing around. You're doing a lot of things. What's your philosophy on practice? And I know you've had this discussion with me before that guys that perform in practice are the guys that get the game minutes.
Well, in practice, we try to do a lot of things in the full court. So we'll get our 3 or 4 base things that we do, emphasizing rebounding, transition defense, guarding in the half court, and then we let them get up and down and work on guarding both in our press and in our matchup zone, and then running offense in the half court. And I want my guys, even though it's maybe 2:15, where some coaches might go 3 hours, in that 2 hours and 15 minutes, it's going to be a great workout. And you're exactly right. I've had guys in my career that it could be a walk-on on our team that beat out a junior that started for a year for a week or two if the junior's not practicing the right way. And I give everybody an equal opportunity. I tell our team, you guys will decide your role. It won't be me. You'll decide it by what you do in practice. And I think that keeps everything on a level playing field.
You recently played 2 exhibition games, one against Slippery Rock and one against Truman State. What did you learn about your team in those 2 scrimmages, and where are some areas where you feel like after watching them in those 2 games you got to get better?
Well, our goal, John, defensively is to make the opponent shoot 40% of their balls behind the three-point line. We want to speed them up. We want them to take tough contested shots over top of our zone. And in our first 2 exhibition games, they shot 100 shots between the 2 teams. 55 of them came from the three-point land. So in that regard, we're making them do some things we want them to do. But we certainly have to be a better team blocking out. We're, again, not a team with great size. We've gotten bigger through recruiting, but we've got to become a better blockout team. Our press, because Neil and Gerald are out right now, hasn't been as good as I'd like it to be. That will continue to grow and evolve as we go along. We've got a long way to go. I'm probably like every coach in the country this time of year. You don't necessarily love your team, but I do have a good group that's working extremely hard, and we're going to be fine as it goes along.
New Conference USA, a lot of new teams in this league. I don't know how you're familiar are with those new teams, but how do you see the makeup of Conference USA? I guess there's 16 teams playing for the championship. How do you see the makeup there, and how things might sort of pan out in Conference USA?
Well, there's a lot of teams, and some of the teams I'm not real familiar with, but I'll say this. Everyone would assume losing Memphis, who's been kind of the dominant team in our league for many years, that the league would weaken. And when you look at Middle Tennessee State, coached by Kermit Davis, they were an at-large NCAA tournament team a year ago, have a great program. Old Dominion's always had good basketball teams and a great program. Louisiana Tech, the job Michael White's done there, won 27 games a year ago coming in, and they were an NIT team. Charlotte has always been a good team going back to their years in Conference USA. So there's been some good teams added, and I think top to bottom the league is very strong. I think it's probably as balanced this year as it's been in a long time. So every night you've got to have your A game and be ready to play.
What about your schedule? Talk about your schedule a bit. What's your scheduling philosophy, and how do you like the way the schedule sort of is set up this year?
Well, philosophy-wise, John, I think you always want to put yourself in a position to have a high enough RPI that through your strength of schedule, through getting some non-conference quality wins, that you give yourself a chance to get an at-large berth. Last year we were right there. We were probably literally 1 win away from being an NCAA tournament team, although I will say on record I thought we should have been in. But we had a nice schedule. What the problem is, we only had 3 home games. In our 13 non-conference games, we had to go on the road and play 10 of those at some really, really challenging places. So this year it's a little bit more balanced. We're still going on the road and playing in some tough environments. We go to DePaul, to South Alabama, to North Dakota State, who has a really good team, 2 Louisville defending national champions, 2 Western Kentucky, and then we've got some really tough teams coming into our league, into our arena. Georgia State, who's picked to win the Sun Belt, Morehead State, where I used to coach, has a really nice team. So with non-conference-wise, it's never easy. The hardest part, the most challenging part, is getting teams to come to the greenhouse. Not a lot of people want to come and play Southern Miss on our home floor.
Now, that's kind of a tribute to the job that you've done. People don't want to play a home game at Reed Green, or a road game rather, at Reed Green Coliseum.
Well, I think it's a tribute to the previous coaches. You know, you go back to Coach Turk and Coach Green, Coach Eustacy. That's always been a tough place to play. And then that's all encompassing, attributed to our fans, the way that they support this program. And when it gets rocking in the greenhouse now, I've coached a lot of different places. We've been at the old Barnhill Arena, Rupp Arena, the Deaf Dome at LSU when we had our great teams. It's as loud as it can be, but those last 3 games in particular last year at Reed Green Coliseum, it was as exciting and probably as passionate of a crowd that I've been around in a long time.
You opened the season up on Friday night against Jackson State. They've got a new coach and several new players. What's your thoughts on that season opener on Friday night?
Well, I've known Wayne Brent a long time, going back to when I was an assistant at LSU. He was an assistant at Ole Miss. He's a great basketball coach. I know he's going to do a fantastic job there. They have some really good players, not many returning, but the couple, 2 or 3 that are returning are good players. He brought in 9 freshmen, some highly touted guys that were recruited by higher level schools, and he kept them right there in the Jackson area. So they're going to be a talented young team. They have a transfer guard from Arkansas, Nobles, who's a really nice player. So it's going to be a good test for us on opening night. We certainly hope to have a great crowd that'll help us against a good Jackson State team.